Most leaders don't avoid hard conversations because they're weak. They avoid them because they care. But when care turns into fear or insecurity or stagnation, communication breaks down and leadership gets stuck. Every leader I've coached has hit this wall, the conversation they know they need to have, but keep putting off. And often, the longer we wait, the heavier it gets. Avoidance isn't a leadership strategy, it's actually a trust leak.
Oh man, we have seen this so many times, Eric, and I would say we have lived this probably even more time.
I'm a professional hard conversation avoider. I'm an expert. I've developed every possible coping mechanism to avoid having hard conversations. But I think you and I both know now, after years of pressing in, developing the simple skills, and actually practicing this stuff, it's we understand it in our brains, but I think experientially, it's really hard to believe that hard conversations can actually lead to greater human connection, partnership, intimacy.
Yes.
When everything in our amygdala, right, that part of our brain that's responsible for warning us of impending danger, is shouting at us, don't have this conversation, it's going to lead to really destructive things.
Absolutely. And for me, I know I love to rationalize my way out of a hard conversation. I love to convince myself that it's all just gonna work out itself out if I just don't look at it for long enough. And we know that these conversations, as you just said, ultimately build trust, but why on the front end do they feel so risky?
Yes. I think avoiding hard conversations is often more about self-protection than anything else. I think one of our justifications is to say, well, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. Well, I don't want to make this difficult for them. But I think if we're being brutally honest, it's more about protecting our own egos or emotions or fears in any of those relationships. We're afraid of being misunderstood, of damaging a relationship, or of even losing influence. But the truth is, avoiding the conversation is actually what begins to erode the trust in that connection. Because I think what happens is both parties start to feel the distancing, the disconnection of hard conversations that aren't happening. Because if we're carrying those around, we will begin to operate out of the overflow of that avoidance, whether we realize it or not, almost at a subconscious level. We're going to talk to someone, we're going to treat them out of the overflow of that avoidance experience.
Yeah. And I know for me, a huge thing that I lean into when I'm avoiding conversation, frankly, is just the desire to avoid discomfort. Like,
Yes.
I want to feel comfortable. And I know that for a moment, I'm going to have to step into discomfort.
Yeah.
And so I'm almost willing to put up with months of moderate discomfort in that relationship instead of just entering the discomfort and getting it over and done with.
Well, and the great lie that I know I'm often susceptible to is, oh, this will work itself out. Oh, this will pass over. Oh, time will take care of it. And unfortunately, none of those are true. And so, I think what we're both touching on is that it requires a great degree of courage to step into hard conversations, believing that there's something greater available on the other side. Just for a moment, because I know that for our listeners, in our first season, we unpack some of our core tools. And one of those tools in particular speaks to, I think, some of the key elements that we need to consider as we think about having hard conversations. I think it's twofold. One is being very intentional about how we're leading ourselves. We talked about that through the lens of self-leadership, right? Starts in self-awareness, emotional intelligence, but we have to eventually lead ourselves. And part of leading ourselves is being really honest about the need to have those conversations. And then we have to move from leading ourselves to how are we seeing the other person? Because if we're not careful, we can jump into these hard conversations ready to beat somebody up, ready to overpower them, kind of with an energy that is not going to lead to great outcomes. And so how we see the other party, how we view them is equally important. So we're now talking about self-leadership and then we're transitioning into others awareness. And I think for our listeners to go back and listen to that episode or check into our other resource on a more resources on emotional intelligence, because I think once we have a simple and helpful mental framework, it's going to give us greater clarity and confidence to step into these hard conversations.
I absolutely agree. And I I also want to add that these conversations require, I notice for myself, they require the use also of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
I have to step in. As we often say, we can only lead others to where we have led ourselves, where we are leading ourselves.
Yeah.
I have to step in with the personal responsibility and say, here's my part of this situation. I have to have the honesty and humility to look at the situation and identify what those pieces are. This is something I've been leaning into with my 2 teenage children right now. Guys, yes, it is very easy to look at the other person and identify what they're contributing to the situation, how they messed up, where they misstep, where they took a misstep. It's a lot harder to pause and look at, oh man, what did I do that led us here? But it is crucial for me when I'm stepping into these hard conversations to take a minute and do that work as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a moment here and just kind of share some practical handles in terms of we're working with clients and I'm helping a client prepare for a difficult conversation.
Mhm.
The first is what you said. The first order of business is that we own and take full responsibility for whatever part we have to play in the situation. Even whether it's a conflict that's arisen or whether that's having to bring some challenge to a team member of ours, whatever the case is, we're always best off if we enter into a conversation from a place of personal honesty and humility, right? Because I think when we operate from that posture, the other party they feel the humility, they feel the grace, the kindness, the gentleness of our approach when we've taken as much responsibility as we can. So we're not coming in to bash somebody over the head. Secondly, and this goes for my marriage, with my adult kids, with team members, with clients, in any context, what I find is we have to prioritize human connection. So often hard conversations become about, I've got to get out what I think you've done wrong or how I want to challenge you or the difficult issue at hand, right? It becomes all about the issue. And I tell people, if you prioritize the issue, you're going to miss the person. And if you miss the person,
Yeah.
then that is going to erode trust, because we always say that human beings have a fundamental need to feel seen, heard, and valued. And so if we prioritize the human connection, in other words, we're engaging with the other party from a position of empathy and a desire to understand. We talked about practicing curiosity. Well, if the hard conversation is more about how do we learn through this conversation? What do we have to learn about ourselves, about each other, about the circumstances involved? When we enter from that position, what it does is it takes the other party off of their heels, right? Because whenever we have to have our conversation, the other party generally is going to feel defensive, feel like they're being attacked. And so whatever we can do to communicate, I'm here to talk about this so that we can learn together, so that we can move forward together. And what that does is not only prioritize human connection, it prioritizes the end goal, which is we want partnership.
Yeah.
We want to come out of this on the other side feeling like it's a win-win scenario. And I often remind clients, win-win scenarios are the overflow of a commitment that we're going to learn together. Because if we're learning together, then whatever changes need to happen feel far less threatening than if I'm coming to you saying, you need to change this, you did this wrong, this was bad, don't do that again.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It reminds me actually of a conversation I had yesterday with a leader who reached out and was like, I made a communication misstep and now I have to have a hard conversation with my team.
Yeah.
And this was born out of a leadership fear that this person had, that she didn't have all of the answers.
Mm.
And she recognized that there was a gap on her team that she needed to fill, and she wasn't sure how that was all going to play out. And so, because of that lack of certainty, she didn't communicate well to the existing team members, which meant that they suddenly are looking at this new person coming on the team and going, oh my gosh, am I threatened? Is my job at stake? What do I need to do here? Um, and so she was like, what do I do? And I said, here's what you have to do. One, now you have to schedule that conversation. Now you have to step in and make this a priority. And two, you have to recognize something that's going to be uncomfortable for you is that you don't have to know what the end game is going to look like. As a leader, sometimes we feed ourselves this lie that I can't lead unless I know what the end result is going to be.
Mhm.
And often, especially if you're a visionary leader, but even in this case, this person is a very systematic, organized leader. We can't know the end game. We can only know a couple steps out. And so I said, lean into that with as you just said, with honesty and humility. Own the fact that you don't know the end game, but here's what I do know, and here's what I can commit, and here's how I see us moving forward, which is lending that partnership. It is opening the communication channels, and it really is, it's creating a situation on your team where, as you said, we are learning and growing together.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited. I'm excited to hear how this conversation goes. As I said, this just happened yesterday. So this leader's going to have that conversation with her team, and it's going to take courage. But I think now she has just that little bit of clarity to offer a couple of stepping stones, right? We don't have to know the end game, but if we can give certainty around some clarity around a couple stepping stones, things that we are willing to commit to, it goes a long way in these hard conversations with our team members.
Oh, I love that story. And let me offer a story from a different perspective on more on the personal side, because I want our listeners to feel the power of these principles in practice, not just in the professional space, but in their personal lives, right? Because all of life revolves around the relationships that we're partnering with to do things that matter to us, whether that's at home or at work or in our hobbies or whatever. I remember this was probably a year ago. One of my extended family members and his spouse were coming over our house kind of regularly, and we were just really enjoying having them, and my kids love them, and so they love seeing them. But we noticed that when they were coming to our house, they were kind of coming in with a funky energy, and the best way I can describe it is that they were just very like sarcastic with each other and nitpicky with each other and biting at each other. It kind of felt like they were carrying the residue of whatever unresolved tensions, whatever hard conversations they weren't either able or able to work through or avoiding. It's like they were carrying that energy into our home. And that's one of our core values in our home is like, we've got to have those conversations. Don't carry those on. Right. And it was affecting the experience. And of course, because we love them and want them to be in our home, I gotta be honest, I didn't want to say anything. I just was like, it'll be fine. They'll figure it out. They'll work through it. But after multiple times of this experience, my wife finally said to me, hey, babe, we've got to have a conversation with them. And I just remember thinking, oh, no. And I remember immediately the fears of, they're going to get angry with us. They're not going to want to come over anymore. They're going to blame us. They're going to think we're being judgmental or critical of them. Whatever the thing was, I just remember feeling like, I don't want to have that conversation.
Sure.
I don't want to harm this relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife reminded me, she said, hey, remember, like these hard conversations actually have the potential to lead to greater connection and intimacy.
That's right.
And sometimes, we talked about this. Sometimes we need people in our lives that love us enough to reflect back to us when we're not bringing our best selves to the table.
Isn't that
So
true?
I gathered all that ammunition to give myself courage. And we sat down with them. We just said, hey, after dinner, we sent the kids away and we said, hey, can we have a quick conversation? Just want to bring something into your attention that we've been experiencing. And, and I remember I led with so many little I just want you guys to know we love you and we love having you in our home. And we've just been so grateful that you spent time with us. And, but
The big but.
in parentheses, I need to have a hard conversation. So I just laid out, I said, hey, the experience with you guys in our home lately has been difficult for these reasons. This is what we've been experiencing. And I don't know what's going on. I just want you to know that's been difficult for us. And, we'd love for you to come over to our home, but to maybe think about the energy that you're bringing into our home, the way that you're treating each other, that impacts the environment, the culture, the atmosphere of our home. And again, I mean, any of our listeners can imagine this same scenario with a coworker or a team member who's showing up and grumpy, angry, hostile, frustrated, withdrawn, shut down, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And and again, my intention in that moment was not to therapize them and figure anything out for them. It was just to reflect to them, hey, this has been difficult for us, and to give them a chance to decide for themselves. Do they want to receive this feedback? Do they want to show up differently?
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you in the first few minutes, the gentleman got really defensive.
Mhm.
And, I could see his body language was shutting down. And I'd said, hey, how do you feel? What are you thinking? And he said, well, we come over here because, we want trust you guys. Now here you are throwing this in our face. And I was like, oh no, this is going to go sideways.
Yeah.
And my wife is far better at these things than I am. She just immediately jumped in with empathy and curiosity and just said, hey, listen, we love you. We're not judging or criticizing you.
Yeah.
We're just reflecting back to you our experience. If you think if we're misunderstanding you, if you think we're being too sensitive, you can tell us. But we just care about you guys. And he softened, his wife softened, and then they began to share, yeah, you know what, actually, we've had some tough times. We've had some conversations we've not wanted to have. And we've been carrying that around with us. And we can imagine how that would impact you guys and other people that we've been spending time with. Anyways, it led to something beautiful. It actually led to greater connection with them, greater intimacy. It wasn't about us fixing them. It wasn't about them fixing themselves in the moment. It was just about sometimes stepping into these conversations and reflecting to other people, this is how I'm experiencing you in this space. But you're an adult and you get to choose.
That's right.
Whether you want to keep showing up that way or whether you want to make a change. And anyways, it was just a beautiful experience that I think has just fueled my courage to continue pressing into these hard conversations with people in my life.
Yeah. I think that is such a beautiful example because you are illuminating the fear of uncertainty. The fear of not knowing how this is going to play out is what often keeps us stuck. But what led you and your wife through that was curiosity and empathy and humility. And I want our listeners to hear that those are the guiding, the flashlights that are going to guide you through kind of the darkness of having some of these hard conversations is curiosity, empathy, and humility. When you know that you need to have these hard conversations, think about those things first, and they will help lead you through that. So, Eric, we always on this podcast and in our coaching want to make things super practical and applicable for our audience. So give us some practical takeaways. What can we do this week as we are kind of processing, listening to this conversation to tackle some of our own hard conversations?
Yes. Well, it's actually one of the exercises that we lead clients through in our coaching process, where we actually require that they identify a hard conversation that they've not had. We encourage them to identify with somebody maybe that they have more trust built up with so they can practice the hard conversation. But I think it's as simple as that. Like, I would encourage our listeners to consider what's a hard conversation that you're avoiding right now. Maybe think of one of those that's with somebody that you do have some trust equity with. And then here's what I tell people: let the other party know right at the beginning of the car, hey, I'm practicing this. I don't know how to do this, but I want to learn how to have hard conversations in a healthy way, in a way that leads to greater connection. That's what I want. I think by setting the vision for the hard conversation at the beginning, the goal is greater connection with you,
Yeah.
not who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad, who's in trouble. Right? Setting that right at the front. Hey, I want to have a hard conversation. At least it's hard for me. I want you to know what I want to fight for in this conversation. I want to fight for greater connection with you, greater understanding of one another, because that's the end game, right? Is our partnership.
Uh-huh.
And then I encourage people to literally write that down, right before you have this conversation, and write down the issues at hand, what you want to communicate, and then actually rehearse what you want to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people to do this, do it in front of a mirror, do it while you're driving. I do this all the time. I rehearse conversations that I know I need to have. And then what I do is I use my imagination to play out the conversation. What if it goes this way? What if it goes this way? What if it goes this way? How am I going to bring the best version of me to this conversation? How do I make sure I don't get defensive, that I don't try to control the conversation? How do I ensure that I can stay in a posture of curiosity and humility and a desire to just understand the other person? How do I prioritize human connection in this conversation? I actually imagine these conversations. I imagine them sometimes going sideways, and what am I going to do in that moment? How am I going to handle myself? And by rehearsing, it means that I have a better chance when I actually get into the conversation of feeling better prepared for whatever may come. And then I would encourage our listener, try it out and find someone that you need to have. I mean, maybe it's not like on a scale of 1 to 10, choose like a 2 out of 10 on the hard conversation scale,
Yeah.
but then lead with, I want to get better at this. I want to learn how to have these conversations. Can I practice this with you? And invite the other person into the experience rather than, hijacking them and saying, hey, I need to tell you something I'm upset about or frustrated by or something that's been bothering me. Yeah, I think if we lead in with that, if we prepared a little bit ahead of time, we're going to have a far better experience. And again, remembering that our ultimate goal is not right, wrong, good, bad, who's in trouble. The end goal is greater human connection, greater partnership, a greater sense of understanding one another, and how do we move forward together.
Yeah. What you're saying is essentially come at them with an invitation and not a club.
I like that. That's great. That's really good. Yep.
Really, I mean, you're on the one hand, you're inviting them into a deeper relationship with you, committing to better communication and connection going forward, as opposed to like coming at them with a bat of like, here's what I'm upset about, which does knock people back on their heels, does not put them in a position to come with the best version of themselves. So I think we have some really practical things that some listeners can work on this week. I love that. And I want to remind them too, you don't have to, and you're not going to say it perfectly, and that's okay.
Yep.
Committing to show up, deciding to show up is the important thing. And really, that's 90% of leadership is committing to show up for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, as always, we're so grateful to those listeners who spend their time with us, and we are committed to sharing out of the overflow of our own life and leadership journeys, the simple principles and practices, the leadership tools that have helped us to succeed more in every area of our life. Thanks for listening. If this helped you name something hard, share it with a fellow leader. Next time, we're digging into a challenge every leader faces at some point: what to do when you feel misunderstood by your team.
As always, you can head to our show notes to see what we have going on, any PDFs or things we are sharing with you down there, and we will see you next time.